The galaxy was not always full of hunger. Once, countless worlds had wide fields, rich rivers, and skies filled with ships that carried goods in peace. Trade was strong, and food was always moving from one planet to another. But then came the plague. No one knew where it had started. Some said it came from a broken world near the edge of the stars. Others believed it was carried by merchants who had not washed their cargo. Whatever the truth, it spread fast and it was deadly. The plague did not kill people directly. It attacked crops. Fields turned black, roots rotted, and even strong plants bent under a strange gray sickness. Entire harvests vanished in days. On some planets, animals began to die too, since their food was gone. Every species in the galaxy suffered, but not in the same way. Many alien races had bodies that depended on special foods. Some could eat only one kind of fruit. Others needed meat from their home animals. When their food vanished, they began to starve. Humans were different. Long ago, on Earth, humans had learned to survive on little. They ate whatever grew in the ground, hunted, fished, or even chewed hard roots to keep alive. The same old truth remained in space. A human could survive on weeds, mushrooms, or even dried insects. No alien could do the same. That made humans dangerous in a galaxy where hunger ruled. Mark was a farmer on Earth. His farm was small, not far from the mountains, with soil that still grew green despite the plague. He had worked the land since he was young, planting grain, beans, and fruit. While other farms around him failed, his still stood. He did not know if it was luck, hard work, or some blessing from the soil itself. What he did know was this: his food was life, and life had become worth more than gold. Mark had a quiet life once. He woke with the sun, worked with his hands in the dirt, and went to sleep with a full stomach and simple peace. But that peace was gone. Raiders came in the night, hungry men and women who carried old weapons and wanted grain. Some he drove away, others he helped, for he could not always raise his hand against the starving. He gave them small sacks of food, hoping mercy would keep them from burning his fields. He also heard rumors. Ships had been seen in the sky. Not human ships, but alien ones. They circled far above, never landing, always watching. Some said they were scouts. Others whispered that they were fleets waiting for the right time to strike. Mark had never seen aliens close before. To him they were only stories told in taverns, pictures on the news, or shadows in the night sky. But if the rumors were true, then even his little farm was not safe. One evening, as the sun went down, Mark stood on the ridge above his farm and looked at the horizon. Smoke rose in the distance. Another farm had been raided. The world was breaking apart piece by piece. Hunger had no mercy. He went back to his barn and checked the hidden cellar. Inside were jars of dried food, sacks of grain, and barrels of water. He had been careful. He knew that one mistake, one careless word to a stranger, could bring trouble. Already, neighbors had begun to disappear. Some left to search for food elsewhere. Some were taken by gangs. Some simply starved. Mark sat on a wooden chair, looking at his hands. They were rough and scarred from years of work. These hands keep me alive, he thought. But he also knew he could not hold off the galaxy with only his two hands. If the aliens came, if they truly wanted Earth's food, then what could a farmer do against ships and weapons from the stars? Still, he would not give up. A human farmer was stubborn. He knew the value of soil, of seeds, of waiting for harvest. A season could be long and hard, but patience and strength brought food in the end. Perhaps patience would save him again. That night, he dreamed of endless fields. Wheat taller than his head swayed under a sky full of strange stars. He walked through the rows, but when he reached for the grain, it turned to ash in his hands. He woke with sweat on his face and the sound of thunder outside. But it was not thunder. It was something else. Mark ran outside and looked up. Far above the clouds, lights moved slowly, blinking like fireflies. They were not stars. They were ships. He felt a cold weight in his stomach. The rumors were true. The hunger war had not yet begun, but Mark knew it was coming. The aliens would not leave Earth alone. To them, food was not just life. It was power. And humans, with their stubborn ability to survive on anything, were now the strongest enemy and the greatest prize. He looked once more at his fields, green under the faint moonlight. Every stalk of grain was worth fighting for. Every seed was a shield against death. And deep in his heart, Mark felt something new. It was not fear, though fear was there. It was not anger, though anger was there too. It was resolve. The galaxy may starve, he thought, but Earth will endure. The world was changing, and Mark, the simple farmer, would soon be part of a war that no one had asked for but everyone had to fight. The war where food itself meant death. The days after the strange lights in the sky were heavy with silence. People in the villages near Mark's farm stopped speaking of hope. They no longer talked about next harvest or next season. They spoke only in whispers about the ships above, waiting in the dark sky. Some said the aliens might come to trade. Others laughed bitterly and said there was nothing left to trade, only to take. Mark kept working in his fields, though his eyes always lifted to the sky. He tilled the soil, watered the plants, and repaired fences, yet the weight of unseen eyes pressed down on him. He knew what the others were feeling. Hunger made people dangerous. Desperation made them cruel. And if aliens were desperate, then they would not come as friends. One morning, Mark heard a rumble. At first, he thought it was thunder rolling from the mountains. But as the sound grew louder, he knew it was no storm. He dropped his tools and ran to the ridge above his farm. From there, he saw shapes cutting through the clouds. Dark, long ships descended, their hulls shining like iron under the sun. Smaller craft broke away, streaking down like arrows. He was not the only one who saw them. Across the valley, men and women shouted. Some ran toward their homes. Others gathered weapons, old rifles, iron tools, even farming blades. They knew what was coming. The ships did not land in open fields to greet or speak. They fell near the storehouses where grain and dried food were kept. Dust rose as they struck the ground, and soon cries of fear and gunfire echoed across the valley. Mark's heart pounded as he raced back to his farm. He locked his cellar door and covered it with boards, then grabbed his rifle. He was not a soldier, but he had hunted since he was a boy. He knew how to hold a weapon steady. From his farmhouse window, he watched smoke rise from the town below. The aliens had come. Through his scope, he saw them for the first time. Their bodies were thin, their skin pale like paper. Their eyes were large and black, without whites. They moved quickly, their long arms carrying strange tools that cut through walls and doors as if they were paper. These were not explorers. These were raiders, hungry ones, searching for food. Mark watched as they broke into a storehouse. Villagers ran forward with rifles, firing desperately. A few aliens fell, but more rushed in. Their weapons fired beams of light that burned wood, stone, and flesh alike. Mark forced himself not to look away. He needed to understand what Earth faced. Within an hour, the town was broken. The aliens dragged sacks of grain to their ships. The villagers who lived through the attack fled into the hills. No voice of peace came from the ships. No banner of truce was raised. Only silence, smoke, and the stench of burning. Mark's hands shook as he lowered his rifle. He had not fired. A single shot from his farm would not change what he saw. He would save his strength for the day when his fields were the ones under attack. Later that night, survivors from the town reached his farm. They were tired, wounded, and frightened. Among them was Anna, a young woman who had lived near the river. She carried a child in her arms, wrapped in a torn blanket. Her face was pale, her voice dry, but her eyes still carried fire. "They took everything," she said simply. "Grain, tools, even water barrels. They will not stop. Next time, they will come here." Mark gave them water and bread from his hidden supply. The child ate slowly, too weak to swallow fast. He knew they were right. His farm had been spared for a day, but not forever. The aliens would move again. And when they did, they would not leave anything behind. In the following days, more people fled to the hills. Some joined together and formed small bands to fight back. Others wandered, lost and hopeless. Word spread quickly across the valleys and into the cities. The aliens were not here for peace. They were here for survival, and their survival meant the death of humans. The leaders of Earth gathered their fleets. Old warships, patrol craft, and even merchant vessels were armed. The defense fleets rose into the sky, forming lines against the black ships above. But the truth was hard to hide. The alien fleets were larger, older, and filled with desperate power. The first clash in space came soon after. Mark did not see it with his own eyes, but the news came fast. Battles above the clouds lit up the night sky, bright flashes like stars exploding. Whole cities watched in silence as the heavens burned. The human fleet fought with bravery. They pushed back the first wave of alien ships, driving them away from Earth's orbit. People cheered. They thought maybe the worst was over. But Mark did not believe it. He knew hunger was not defeated by one battle. Hunger always returned, and it grew stronger the longer it was denied. Back on the ground, the struggle continued. Alien raiding parties struck farms, storehouses, and villages at random. Mark began to dig trenches around his fields. He set traps in the woods and built hidden shelters. The once peaceful farmer had turned his land into a fortress. He did not seek war, but war had come to him. One evening, Anna sat with him by the fire. The child she carried now slept peacefully, full from food Mark had shared. She looked at him and asked, "Why do you still farm? Why do you still plant when the aliens might burn it all tomorrow?" Mark thought for a moment before he answered. His voice was calm, steady. "Because that is what keeps us human. If I stop planting, then hunger wins. If I stop planting, then the aliens win before they even step on this farm. Food is hope. As long as I plant, there is still hope." Her eyes softened. She said nothing more, but Mark knew she understood. The phrase hunger war was spoken for the first time in the days that followed. It was said by leaders, by soldiers, by farmers, and children. This was not a war for land or power. This was a war where food itself was the weapon, the prize, and the reason to fight. Mark lay awake at night, listening to the distant hum of alien ships in the sky. His hands rested on his rifle. His heart rested on his fields. He knew the first raid was only the beginning. The war had begun, and the farmer of Earth was now part of it. The war grew darker with each passing week. Smoke rose from towns, villages were abandoned, and fields turned to ash. Yet humans still stood. They fought in the skies with ships, on the ground with rifles, and in the shadows with stubborn will. And in the middle of it all, people began to notice a strange truth. Humans did not starve as quickly as the aliens. While many alien races collapsed within days without their special foods, humans endured. They ate roots from the ground, weeds boiled in water, dried fish from rivers, even insects crushed into flour. Where aliens weakened, humans lived. Where others fell, humans rose again. This secret was whispered first among the soldiers, then among the leaders, and finally across the galaxy. "Humans can eat anything," the aliens said in fear. To them, this was not just strange. It was terrifying. In a war where hunger ruled, the side that could survive on almost nothing was the side most dangerous of all. Mark learned this truth not from words but from what he saw with his own eyes. He had left his farm for a time to join others in delivering food to nearby settlements. His cart was filled with dried mushrooms, jars of beans, and sacks of grain. With Anna and a few villagers, he traveled the rough roads, always watching the skies. Along the way, they found something that stopped them cold. In the ruins of an old storehouse, they discovered aliens. Not soldiers with weapons, but prisoners, left behind after a raid had gone wrong. Their skin was thin and stretched, their bodies weak. They clutched at the ground as if trying to eat the dirt. One of the villagers raised his rifle, ready to fire. But Mark lifted his hand and stopped him. The aliens did not fight. They could not even stand. Their black eyes followed the humans with a look Mark had seen before, the look of hunger. Anna whispered, "They are starving." Mark stepped forward slowly, holding a piece of dried bread. One alien reached out a long, shaking hand, but when it bit into the bread, it gagged and spat it out. Its body could not take the food. Another tried to eat a bean but fell coughing. Mark understood then. These creatures could not eat what humans ate. They needed their own strange foods, and without them, they were dying. The villagers argued. Some said they should leave the aliens to die. Others said they should kill them quickly before soldiers came to rescue them. But Mark said nothing. He looked at the weak figures on the ground and thought of the stories told by his grandparents, stories of times when even humans had starved and begged for food. Hunger made all creatures the same. He left the aliens alive, though he knew they would not last long. As his cart rolled away, he could not shake the image from his mind. He realized something important. Humans were not only surviving. They were learning. And this difference was more powerful than any weapon. When they reached the settlement, the people welcomed the food with tears. Children grabbed mushrooms and chewed them quickly, their faces lighting with joy. Old men held bowls of boiled weeds and called it a feast. Mark stood quietly, watching. He thought again of the aliens in the ruins. The same food that gave humans strength gave those aliens nothing but pain. Later that night, Mark sat by the fire with Anna and the others. They spoke of the raids, the losses, and the rumors of battles in the skies. Then Anna said, "I wonder if this is the reason they hate us. Not just because we have food, but because we can survive on what they cannot." Her words struck Mark deeply. He nodded slowly. "It is not hate," he said. "It is fear. They fear us because hunger makes them weak. But hunger makes us stronger." The others fell silent, thinking on his words. The next day, as they prepared to return to the farm, Mark spoke with a soldier who had come from the front lines. The soldier was thin and tired, his armor scratched, but his eyes burned with determination. "They are saying this war will not be decided by fleets," the soldier told him. "It will be decided by who can last longer without food. The aliens are strong in battle, but every day they lose more to hunger. We lose people too, but we can last. That is our weapon. That is why we may win." Mark carried those words with him as he traveled home. His farm was still standing, his cellar still hidden, but the weight on his heart was heavier than ever. The hunger war was not only a fight for land or grain. It was a fight of nature itself. And in that fight, humans were different. One evening, as he worked in his field, he thought of the future. Could humans use this strength to make peace? Could they teach the aliens new ways to live? Or would fear always turn survival into battle? He did not know. But he knew one thing for certain. As long as humans planted seeds, as long as they found ways to eat, they would endure. And endurance was the strongest weapon of all. The sky rumbled again that night. More ships passed overhead, their shadows covering the stars. Mark gripped his rifle and looked at his green fields. The hunger war was far from over. But now, he understood why humans stood a chance when others fell. It was not just courage. It was not just weapons. It was the secret of human strength, the power to survive when all others starved. And that secret would soon change the course of the war. The news of battles in the skies reached every corner of Earth. Some towns cheered when human fleets pushed alien ships away, but the joy never lasted. The aliens always returned, hungrier and more desperate. Farms and villages near Mark's Valley lived each day in fear, watching the skies for dark shapes that meant death. But in those days of fear, something strange happened. Not all aliens came with weapons raised. One evening, a messenger rode into the valley. He was pale, thin, and frightened, but he carried a white flag tied to a stick. Behind him were two aliens, walking slowly with their heads lowered. They carried no guns, only empty hands. The villagers gathered around with suspicion. Men raised their rifles, women pulled children behind them. The aliens looked weak, their steps unsteady, their eyes sunken from hunger. The messenger raised his voice. "They want to speak," he said. "They claim they do not fight for the raiders. They say they can trade. They want safety." The crowd murmured. Some shouted that it was a trick. Others, tired of war, whispered that maybe it was a chance for peace. Mark stood at the edge of the gathering, his face hard. He watched the two aliens closely. They looked no stronger than the starving ones he had seen before. In the end, the leaders of the valley agreed. A deal was made. The aliens offered knowledge of advanced tools in exchange for food and protection. They promised their kind would not raid the valley. Many believed it was a step toward ending the war. Mark was not so sure. For a time, it seemed the deal might work. The aliens helped repair machines, showed the villagers how to build stronger shelters, and even taught them simple ways to shield against raiding craft. In return, they were given small amounts of grain and fruit. People began to relax. For the first time in months, some even laughed again. But Mark did not trust them. He kept his farm guarded, his cellar locked, and his traps hidden in the woods. He knew hunger could turn any promise into ash. He had seen it in human eyes before. He could see it in alien eyes now. His fears were proven right one night. The moon was high, and the valley slept. Mark sat awake on his porch with his rifle across his lap. Then he saw a flicker of light in the distance. Not the glow of torches, but the burning of fields. He stood quickly, heart pounding. Smoke rose against the stars. Shouts broke out in the village. The aliens who had sworn peace had called others. Raiders poured into the valley, their weapons cutting through doors and walls. The storehouses went up in flames. Families ran screaming as fire spread through the fields. Mark rushed down the slope, firing into the darkness. His shots dropped two raiders, but there were too many. He saw Anna running with the child in her arms, chased by tall figures with glowing blades. Mark shouted and ran toward her, firing again. The raiders fell, and Anna escaped into the woods. The valley was chaos. Houses burned, fields turned to black ash, and the night sky glowed red. Mark saw the two aliens who had come under the white flag. They no longer looked weak. They stood with the raiders, pointing toward the hidden cellars where food was stored. Their promise of peace had been nothing but a lie. Anger filled Mark's chest like fire. He raised his rifle and fired, striking one of the traitors down. The other fled into the smoke. Around him, villagers fought back, but the raid was brutal. The aliens took what food they could carry and set fire to the rest. By dawn, the valley was broken. Half the homes were gone, the fields ruined, and many people dead or missing. The survivors gathered among the ashes, their faces gray with grief. Some wept openly. Others stared with empty eyes. Mark stood among them, his rifle in hand, his clothes burned and torn. His farm had been spared only because it was hidden in the hills, but his heart was heavy. He had believed, even for a moment, that peace was possible. Now he knew better. The villagers looked to him. He was not a leader, not a soldier, but in that moment, they needed someone to speak. Mark raised his voice, rough and steady. This war is not about peace. It is about survival. They will not stop. They will not trade honestly. They will only take. If we want to live, we must fight. Every field, every seed, every stalk of grain must be defended. Not one piece of food can be spared, because food is life. His words spread among the survivors. Men and women who had been farmers now swore to become soldiers. Children too young to fight carried water and guarded the cellars. The valley had been betrayed, but it was not broken. It would rise again, harder and stronger than before. Far above, in the cold sky, the human fleet prepared another strike. Reports came down that battles were raging near the moons, that alien ships were being pushed back for now. The galaxy was beginning to see that humans were not weak, not soft, and not ready to die. Mark returned to his farm, but it no longer felt like the same place. The green fields seemed smaller, the trees darker. He dug new trenches, built stronger fences, and set more traps. He no longer thought of himself as a farmer. He was a soldier now, a soldier who planted seeds instead of bullets but fought for them just the same. That night, as he sat by the fire, Anna came to him. Her face was tired, her eyes red from tears, but she stood tall. "They burned our homes," she said. "They lied to us. But they will not break us. I will fight with you." Mark looked at her, then at the child sleeping in her arms. He nodded. "Then we fight together." The hunger war had claimed another valley, but in the ashes of betrayal, fire of resistance burned brighter. The aliens had thought hunger would make humans weak. Instead, it made them strong. And the galaxy was about to learn that nothing was more dangerous than a human who had lost everything but the will to survive. The valley carried its scars for many days after the raid. The smoke had faded, the fires were gone, but the smell of ash and burned grain lingered in the air. The villagers worked hard to rebuild, but there was little left. Storehouses were empty, homes were broken, and many friends had been buried in shallow graves. Mark's farm had survived, but survival no longer felt like victory. He knew the aliens would come again, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but they would not stop. Every day, he looked up at the sky, waiting for the black shapes of ships to return. Still, he planted. His hands dug into the soil, sowing seeds with steady patience. Anna helped him, carrying water and tending to the child who now called his farm home. Other villagers came too. They said the same words again and again: "We cannot live without food. We must grow." Mark agreed, but his heart was heavy. The raid had shown him something cruel. Hunger was not just a weapon. Hunger was a lie waiting to be told. The aliens had tricked them once, and he feared it would happen again. News from the cities soon reached the valley. Messengers came riding fast, bringing word of battles above Earth. The human fleet had won some fights, pushing alien ships back, but the cost was high. Every victory left ships broken and soldiers lost. Worse still, rumors spread that the aliens were uniting. Whole fleets were gathering beyond the edge of the solar system, preparing for a single strike against Earth. And alongside these rumors came whispers, cold and sharp. The aliens were spreading lies across the galaxy. They claimed humans had made the plague, that humans had poisoned crops on purpose so they could rise as rulers while others starved. Many alien races believed the story, for fear made truth easy to twist. When Mark heard this, he clenched his fists. "So that is how they fight now," he said. "They cannot win with food, so they try to win with words." Anna looked at him with worry. "If other races believe the lie, they will all turn against us." Her words came true sooner than they hoped. One night, as the villagers gathered by the fire, a scout rushed into the camp. His face was pale, his breath quick. "Armadas," he gasped. "Not one fleet, many. They are uniting. They will come for Earth." Fear spread like fire through the valley. Mothers held their children, old men shook their heads, and soldiers sharpened blades they knew might not be enough. The people of Earth had stood strong in small battles, but if the whole galaxy came at once, what chance did they have? It was then that Mark faced his most difficult choice. That evening, while walking the border of his farm, he found something unexpected. Hiding in the woods near his fields were two alien children. They were thin, their skin pale and stretched, their black eyes wide with fear. One held the other's hand tightly, trembling as Mark stepped closer. He raised his rifle at first, but then lowered it slowly. The children did not run. They did not fight. They only looked at him with hunger. Anna found him standing there. She gasped when she saw the children. "They will bring soldiers," she whispered. "We should drive them away." But Mark shook his head. He looked at the children, then at his farm. He thought of the lies being spread, the stories that painted humans as monsters. And he thought of what hunger had already done, twisting promises into betrayal, turning neighbors into raiders. "They are not soldiers," he said quietly. "They are only hungry." Anna hesitated. She looked at the child in her own arms, then back at the two alien children. She did not argue again. Mark brought them into his barn. He gave them water first, then soft fruit from his cellar. The children ate slowly, their bodies shaking with every bite. They could not eat much, but what they did eat gave them strength. They looked at him with something he did not expect: trust. For the first time, Mark wondered if survival could lead to something other than endless war. But it was a dangerous act. If the villagers found out, they might see him as a traitor. If soldiers discovered the children, they might kill them without question. Mark knew this, but he also knew the truth. If humans wanted to win, they needed more than rifles and fleets. They needed to show that survival could mean mercy. The days passed, and the children grew stronger. They began to speak in broken words, telling of their people's hunger, of raids that were not ordered by leaders but by desperate bands of starving clans. They spoke of fear: fear of humans, fear of death, fear of the plague that had stolen their worlds. Mark listened. Each word cut into him like a blade. He realized then that hunger was not only Earth's enemy. It was the enemy of all. But the war outside did not pause for his small act of mercy. Scouts reported more alien fleets drawing near. Earth's leaders sent word to every valley and city: prepare for the greatest battle. Mark stood once more on the ridge above his farm, watching the horizon. He could see soldiers training in the fields below, hear the sound of hammers as villagers forged weapons. He knew the storm was coming. Beside him, Anna asked softly, "Was it right, what you did? Giving them food?" Mark kept his eyes on the dark sky. "If we fight only with fear, we will become like them. But if we fight with mercy, maybe there is another way." She did not answer. She only looked at him, then at the alien children who now played quietly in the barn. The dangerous choice had been made. Mark had given food to the enemy. But deep in his heart, he hoped that one act of kindness could grow like a seed, spreading roots beyond the fire of war. Because he knew the final battle was coming, and when it did, food alone would not be enough to decide who lived and who died. The nights in the valley grew colder. Fires burned longer, and people huddled together, whispering about the fleets gathering in the dark sky. Even the strongest among them could not hide their fear. Everyone knew that Earth was no longer facing raids or small battles. This time, the whole galaxy seemed ready to strike. Mark stood at the edge of his field, looking up at the stars. He had seen warships before, but now he imagined thousands of them, stretching across space like a wall of steel. He thought of the alien children hiding in his barn and wondered if their people were among those ships. Anna came to stand beside him. Her face was tired but calm. "The council says the final attack may come within days," she said. Mark nodded. "They are right. I can feel it." She hesitated, then asked, "What will we do with the children when the soldiers come?" The question weighed heavy on him. If the soldiers discovered the alien children, they would not understand mercy. They would see only the enemy. Yet Mark could not send them away. They had no food, no family, no chance of survival outside the valley. "They stay," he said at last. "If the war is truly for survival, then we must show what survival means. Not hate. Not fear. Something better." Anna looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we will protect them together." Days passed quickly. Soldiers arrived in the valley, setting up camps and digging trenches. The air filled with the sound of drills, shouted orders, and the clang of metal. War was no longer a far-off story, it was at their doorstep. Mark helped where he could, repairing carts and carrying supplies. Yet his mind was never far from the barn. Every evening, he checked on the alien children, bringing them food and water. They grew stronger each day, their fear softening into quiet trust. One of them, the older child, began to speak more clearly. "They say you are monsters," the child whispered one night. "But you give us bread." Mark paused. "And what do you believe?" The child looked at him with wide, dark eyes. "I believe hunger makes monsters. Not people." The words struck him deeply. He realized the child saw something he had been too blind to notice. The true enemy was not human or alien. The true enemy was hunger itself. One evening, as the villagers gathered by the fire, a messenger arrived. His clothes were torn, his face pale with exhaustion, but his voice carried the weight of truth. "The fleets have crossed into our system," he said. "They will be here within days." A heavy silence fell. Mothers clutched their children. Farmers looked at the ground. Soldiers tightened their grips on weapons. Mark felt the air grow colder. The storm was not coming, it was already here. The next day, Mark was summoned by the local commander, a man named Rowan. The commander was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes sharp as steel. He had fought in space before, leading men against alien ships. "I hear you have strong harvests," Rowan said as they walked along the farm. "That is good. We need food to keep the soldiers standing." Mark nodded, though unease crept through him. "You will have what I can give." Rowan stopped and looked at him carefully. "There are also rumors. Strange rumors. They say you hide something in your barn. Is that true?" Mark's chest tightened. For a moment, he thought of lying. But Rowan's eyes left no room for tricks. "I have children there," Mark said quietly. "They are not human. But they are only hungry. I gave them bread." Rowan's expression hardened. "You gave food to the enemy." "I gave food to children," Mark corrected, his voice steady. The commander was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "If others hear of this, they will not forgive you. They will call you traitor. Be careful, farmer." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Mark standing in the cold wind. That night, Mark told Anna what had happened. She was frightened, but she did not blame him. Instead, she placed her hand on his and said, "If truth brings danger, then let it. At least we chose mercy." Still, Mark knew the risk had grown. The war outside was dangerous, but the war inside between fear and hope was just as deadly. On the third night, the sky lit up with fire. Streaks of light burned across the heavens as ships clashed above Earth. The villagers ran to the ridges, watching the distant battle. The ground shook faintly with every explosion far above. "It has begun," someone whispered. Mark watched silently. His heart pounded, but not with fear. It was something heavier, something that felt like the weight of the whole world pressing on his chest. The alien children stood beside him, holding Anna's hand. Their dark eyes reflected the burning sky. For the first time, Mark wondered if they understood that their own people were up there, fighting to destroy the very land that fed them. The battle raged for hours. Smoke trails cut the stars, and fire lit the night like false suns. Then, before dawn, wreckage began to fall. Burning pieces of ships streaked through the atmosphere, crashing into the forests and hills around the valley. Some pieces were human. Others were not. By morning, soldiers came with grim news. The human fleet had fought bravely but had been pushed back. The enemy was still coming. They will land soon, Commander Rowan told the villagers. When they do, we fight here, on this ground. Fear spread again, but Mark stood tall. He looked around at his people, farmers, mothers, children, soldiers, and felt the truth rising in his chest. If Earth was to survive, they could not fight only with weapons. They had to fight with something stronger. He thought of the alien children in his barn. He thought of the trust in their eyes, of the words they had spoken about hunger making monsters. Mark knew then what he must do. That night, as fires burned across the valley, Mark gathered the villagers. He stood before them, his voice steady though his heart raced. Tomorrow they will come, he said. They will come with ships and soldiers, with fire and fear. But listen well, this war is not only theirs. It is ours too. And it is not a war only of weapons. It is a war of truth. The villagers looked at him, confused. He gestured to the barn, and after a pause, the alien children stepped out into the firelight. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some stepped back in fear, others in anger. Mark raised his voice. These children came here hungry. If hunger is the weapon, then food must be our answer. We must fight not only with rifles but with what makes us human. If we forget mercy, we have already lost. Silence followed. The fire crackled, the wind howled, and the people stared at the children who stood trembling but unafraid. It was a dangerous moment. The crowd could have turned against him, could have shouted him down. But instead, one old woman stepped forward. She looked at the children, then at Mark, and said, "Then we will protect them too." Slowly, others nodded. Not all, but enough. The seed had been planted. Mark looked up at the burning sky. The war was not over. In truth, it had only just begun. But now, in the valley, there was a new kind of strength. A choice had been made. And sometimes, a single choice could change the course of everything. The smoke from the last battle still floated above Earth. Broken ships burned in the sky, and the ground carried scars from falling wrecks. The people of Earth were tired. Their bodies were weak from months of struggle, but their spirits still stood strong. The hunger war had taken more than anyone could count. Yet, somehow, humans had endured. Mark walked through the fields near his home. They were no longer the quiet green places he remembered. Many patches had been burned by alien fire, and others were trampled by soldiers. But in the middle of the broken land, a small line of crops had survived. He bent down, touched the soil, and felt a spark of hope. Not far away, groups of humans and alien survivors sat together under tents. The war had ended not with total victory, but with a truce. Both sides had suffered too much to continue. The hunger that had driven the galaxy into madness was still there, but humans had proven something new. They had shown that food could be grown differently, and survival could be shared. The council of leaders met in the ruins of a city hall. Generals, farmers, engineers, and even alien speakers sat around a large wooden table. The air was heavy. Every decision they made now would shape the future of the galaxy. A tall general stood and said, "We cannot fight forever. Our people are tired. If food is our weapon, it must now become our gift. Some disagreed. One human commander slammed his hand on the table. These aliens burned our towns. They stole from us. Why should we give them what we have grown with our own blood and sweat? But an older woman replied calmly, because if we do not, they will return. They will grow hungry again, and the fire will rise once more. We cannot survive endless wars. If we teach them to grow what we grow, then the need for war will die. Mark was there as a witness, chosen because he had helped save alien children during the darkest days. When he heard their voices around the table, he remembered those small faces. He remembered the way their hands shook when he gave them bread. That memory made him stand. He spoke in a simple, steady voice. I am only a farmer. I am not a soldier or a leader. But I know this, food is life. If we hold it like a weapon, it will always bring death. If we share it, it can bring peace. The hunger war was never about hate. It was about need. We can end the need, and then we end the war. The room went quiet. The words of a farmer carried more power than all the speeches of generals. One alien speaker, a thin being with silver skin, nodded slowly. Humans are strange, he said. You can eat almost anything. You can survive where others cannot. But maybe that is why you also know how to endure pain and still show kindness. Perhaps your gift is not only your food, but your heart. The council agreed at last. A plan was made. Humans would share seeds, farming methods, and new food packs that could be grown on many worlds. In return, the aliens would swear to keep peace and to protect these new farms. It would not be easy, but it was a start. Mark returned to his land with others by his side. For the first time, alien hands worked beside human hands in the fields. Together they cleared the burnt soil, planted new crops, and built water lines. It was strange at first. The aliens did not understand the tools, and some of them were still afraid. But little by little, the work joined them. Children ran across the fields, both human and alien, laughing together. They did not see enemies. They saw friends who were once hungry and were now fed. That laughter was stronger than any weapon. In the cities, ships carried seeds across the skies. New farms were built on moons and barren planets. Humans showed how to grow mushrooms in caves, how to plant grains in poor soil, how to turn weeds into food. The galaxy began to learn a new lesson: hunger could be beaten not with fire, but with knowledge. Months later, the fields near Mark's farm were green again. Rows of tall crops stood proudly against the wind. The scars of war were still visible, but they were no longer the only story written on the land. Life had returned. Mark stood at the edge of his farm one evening, looking at the horizon. The sun set in colors of red and gold, and he heard voices from the workers finishing their day. He felt tired but at peace. A young boy, human, ran up to him with a basket of fresh harvest. Behind him walked two alien children who now lived with the humans. Look, the boy said with pride, we grew this together. Mark smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Yes, he said softly. Together. That is how we will survive. The hunger war was over, but its memory would remain. It would remind the galaxy of the dark days when food meant death. And it would also remind them of the day when one farmer, and many like him, proved that food could also mean life. Above, the stars shone brightly. For the first time in many years, the night sky was peaceful. Ships no longer carried armies, but seeds. Worlds no longer waited for raids, but for rain. The war for survival had ended, and in its place, a new season of hope had begun. Mark took a deep breath of the cool air and whispered to himself, this is the way it should have always been. And with that, he walked back to the fields, ready to plant again, ready to keep building a future where hunger would never again lead to war.